Good morning. Today is Thursday, March the 25th, and we continue reading from our wee book, Bright Evening Star by Madeleine as we continue with our daily Lenten devotion. Today we begin chapter 11. I was blind and now I see. During his human ministry, Jesus continued to heal, to shock, to tell stories, such as the story of the sower who sowed seed. Some of it fell on the path, and the birds came and ate it. Some fell on rock and was withered by the hot sun. Some fell on thorns, and the thorns choked it. And some fell on good soil and brought forth grain, and yielded a great crop. And then he added, "Whoever has ears, listen." For already Jesus was aware of how few people heard what he said, or understood what he meant, and this must have been grief to him. He told his listeners that the parables were like lights, not to be hidden, but to be put on a stand to give light to all. And he told his friends that they were to be lights, lights not to be hidden, but to give light to the world. Jesus was light, the light of the world, and he gave light. He opened the eyes of a blind man from birth, and again he did this on the Sabbath. Was this deliberate? As usual, antagonizing the Pharisees, who pronounced that Jesus was a sinner because he healed on the Sabbath. This perverse legalism is still around today. The Jewish leaders asked the man's parents, "Is this really your son who you say was born blind? How then does he now see?" And the parents did not want to upset the religious leaders, so they told them they did not know. "He is of age. Ask him." And the young man said simply, "All I know is that I was blind, and now I see." And we are left wondering who was blind, the blind man from birth or the Pharisees. Jesus leaves us little doubt. It's important to remember that not all the religious leaders distrusted and hated Jesus. Joseph of Arimathea, Nicodemus, Jairus, leaders of the synagogue, all men who were important in the religious establishment, were drawn to Jesus. Their respect for him must have carried some weight, but not enough. It is hard to understand how Jesus must have felt as he moved through the last difficult weeks, nevertheless knowing that he came from God and would return to God. Even his closeness to the Father could not take away the loneliness and seeming failure. He had to die, to be killed by those that he had come to rejoice with. So we too have to accept the consequences of our choices. I believe that Jesus is calling us to choose freedom with all its responsibility. It would be easier to live in a predetermined universe where everything had already been chosen by God. Freedom is not an easy choice. I don't think I could love a master puppeteer as I love the Holy Trinity, the earth maker, the pain bearer, the life giver, the Holy Spirit, the comforter Jesus sent to be with us. I trust that Spirit, even when the winds blow wildly. When I have a decision to make, I usually ask myself what I think Jesus would do and what Jesus would want me to do, and I do not always know the answer. I ask for the guidance of the Spirit, and I believe that it is always given, but sometimes I do not hear as I should. But I know that I am loved, even when I am not able to recognize and accept that love. Sometimes I am given my most wondrous glimpse of Jesus in the small or unexpected things, from a friend pouring a cup of tea to looking up at the evening sky and seeing the tiny sliver of a moon and staying to watch the stars come out. I am filled with awe at the wonder of God's leaving all that glory and coming to the poor fallen thing that he became, that has become of his glorious little planet, peopled by creatures who have the ability to choose right and wrong, and who so often choose wrong. Why does this give me hope rather than despair? I suppose it gives me hope because there is nothing that happens, nothing that is not part of God's concern, part of that love which expressed itself completely in the Incarnation. Our wrong choices are ours, not God's. The terrible things that happen are usually because of our wrong choices. A friend came for tea. A friend comes to tea asking, "You mean it was not part of God's plan for Kathleen to be killed in an automobile accident?" "No," I exclaimed. "Kathleen was killed because a drunken driver crossed the median and ran into her car. God did not make that driver drink too much. It was, once again, a human creature who had done wrong, causing pain and great anguish. God does not plan our sin and error." Well, why didn't God stop him? Because God made us with free will, and that means God does not go around waving magic wands. But what does God do? God is in it with us. That's the affirmation of the Incarnation. Oh, I don't like it. I don't either. But I do know that I'd like a totally pre-planned universe even less. What does this kind of insistence on God's omnipresence actually do to God's loving and creative potency? Nothing. It takes more power than I can imagine to give up power. Perhaps this kind of thinking should change the way I pray, but it doesn't. Maybe because I pray in so many different ways. I am often anxiously demanding, "Fix it, do something, save, help." God isn't just sitting back watching the universe unfold. God does not interfere with free will, and yet God is the creator of the great dance of being, participating, loving. Sometimes the paradox makes sense to me only as I hold out my hands for the bread and wine. Do I believe in miracles then? Of course I do. I have seen miracles, participated in miracles, and I don't want them explained away, nor do I try to reconcile these miracles with God's precious gift of free will. Jesus said, "Anything you ask in my name, I will give you." A family in my church prayed faithfully and with complete trust as they watched their daughter die of cancer. A young woman who was a physician working among the poorest of the poor, who had given her life to good. What did Jesus mean? Not that he would always answer yes, but what did he mean? When he gave that promise, what did he mean? We have no answer. Does it have something to do with eternity rather than time? Is it that their daughter was a holy person and reconciled to her death and ready for it, but they were not? Jesus does not break promises, but we may not yet be able to understand the way he keeps them. Kathleen, a 2-year-old baby with leukemia, a brilliant young doctor. It is beyond our comprehension. We want to understand, and it is difficult to accept that we cannot, because we used to be able to say, "It is God's will." But healing is God's will. If we could understand everything, we would have absolute power, and that is not what Jesus came to give us. God gives each of us our own way to be part of the suffering of the world, and part of the joy of the world too. One morning in church, I watched a couple whose dearly wanted baby was colicky and wailed constantly, so that there was no sleep to be had for child or parent. And all three looked white and drawn and exhausted, and yet the mother and father had nothing but joy in their eyes as they tried to hush their screaming infant before taking her out so she could cry without disturbing the service. And then I wondered about the Rwandan babies and the Bosnian babies whose little stomachs were not going to be filled, and who were not going to stop crying. And I knew they were why Christ left the star-flung heavens and came to us to be part of all the pain and suffering and the joy. And I remembered that the first recorded miracle in the Bible was at a wedding. Two people coming together in love, that marvelous love which is never completely understood. And I knew that we do not have to understand. We do not have to understand anything except that the Maker loves us enough to come and be part of us. That is what matters. When we try to explain it, we lose it. When we try to explain the stories which have grown up around God's love, we lose the love in the midst of the explanations, because love defies explanations. What matters is not whether Adam and Eve were actual, provable, existing people, or whether they had belly buttons, or that God in his infinite love peopled this lovely little planet for us to care for and expect that we would love each other, and that we would therefore love the God who made it all. As long as our explanations are stories, seeking after truth rather than fact, we need not fear them. But when they become finite answers to infinite questions, they contribute less to knowledge than to divisions and hatred and tears in heaven. Unless an answer is, I love you, it is apt to cause pain, not explanation. Oh God, I love you, for you love me, and love begets love. Thank you for joining us today as we continued in our reading, and I look forward to being with you again tomorrow. Until then, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.